The deafening crack of a gavel silenced the saloon as Emmeline Clarke stood trembling before the makeshift court, her wrists bound with coarse rope that bit into her skin. Tears streamed down her dirt-smudged face, but she refused to bow her head even as the so-called judge pronounced her sentence. For the theft of goods from Harrington's general store, and having no means to pay restitution, this woman is hereby sentenced to 3 years of indentured servitude, to be sold to the highest bidder. The gray-bearded man's voice boomed through the crowded room, sending a wave of murmurs rippling through the crowd. It was 1876 in the parched settlement of Greeley, Colorado, a town that had sprouted from the dusty plains less than a decade prior. The railroad had brought prosperity to some, but for others like Emmeline, orphaned at 20 and desperate after losing her position as a schoolteacher, it had only brought hardship. "I only took bread," she cried out, her voice cracking. "My brother is sick. He'll die without silence." The judge slammed his gavel again. "The law is the law. The auction begins at noon tomorrow." As the crowd dispersed, Emmeline was dragged back to the sheriff's cramped jail. The cell was little more than a cage, with a small window that let in streams of afternoon sunlight but little air in the stifling summer heat. She sank down onto the rough wooden bench, clutching her sides as sobs racked her slender frame. "What about Timothy?" she whispered to no one. Her 16-year-old brother, bedridden with fever in their tiny rented room above the livery, wouldn't survive without her care. She had promised their dying mother that she would protect him, and now she had failed them both. Miles away, dust billowed behind a lone rider as he urged his chestnut stallion across the open plains. Kade Dawson pulled his bandana higher over his nose, squinting against the setting sun as Greeley came into view. At 30, he had spent half his life in the saddle, working cattle drives and hunting bounties when times got lean. The war had left him with scars both visible and hidden, but the past 5 years as foreman at the Rockingham Ranch had given him something he hadn't experienced since before the fighting: stability. Now, with a pouch of money from cattle sales heavy on his belt, he was headed to town for supplies before returning to the ranch. The approaching darkness meant he'd need to spend the night in town before setting out in the morning. As Greeley's buildings grew larger on the horizon, he had no idea that his life was about to change forever. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the summer heat already building as the sun climbed. Kade stepped out of the hotel onto the boardwalk, adjusting his hat against the glare. He planned to visit the general store, the gunsmith, and then head back to the ranch. Simple errands that should take no more than a few hours. As he walked down the main street, he noticed a crowd gathering near the jailhouse. Curiosity piqued, he crossed the dusty road, his spurs jingling with each step. The sheriff stood on a hastily constructed wooden platform, beside him a young woman with her hands bound before her. Even from a distance, Kade could see her red-rimmed eyes and the proud set of her jaw despite her obvious distress. "What's going on?" Kade asked a weather-beaten old-timer leaning against a hitching post. "Justice, such as it is," the man spat into the dirt. "Girl got caught stealing from Harrington's store. Got no money, so they're selling her services for 3 years to cover the debt." Kade frowned. "Selling her? That's not justice." The old man shrugged. "It's the law. Judge Walton's been doing this for years. Says the jails can't handle feeding all the thieves." Kade studied the woman more carefully. Her simple dress was worn but clean, her light brown hair falling in loose waves past her shoulders. She looked nothing like the hardened criminals he'd encountered in his bounty hunting days. There was something in her eyes, not defeat, but desperation. "Ladies and gentlemen," the sheriff called out, silencing the murmuring crowd. "We're here to auction 3 years of honest labor from this thief, Emmeline Clarke. Bidding starts at $50 to cover her debt to Mr. Harrington, plus court costs." $50, called a portly man whom Kade recognized as the owner of the town's largest saloon. $55, countered a rancher with a hard face and mean eyes. Emmeline visibly flinched as the bidding continued, her gaze darting across the crowd as if searching for escape. When her eyes locked briefly with Kade's, he felt something stir within him, a sense of injustice so strong it nearly took his breath away. $75 from Mr. Simmons, the sheriff announced as the saloon owner raised his hand again. "She'll make a fine addition to my establishment," Simmons said with a smirk that made his intention clear. Several men in the crowd laughed. Emmeline's face paled, and in that moment, Kade knew he couldn't stand by. Without fully understanding why, he stepped forward. $100, he called out clearly. A hush fell over the crowd as heads turned to look at him. The sheriff raised his eyebrows. $100 from Mr. Dawson, he announced. "Any other bids?" Simmons glared at Kade but shook his head. No one else spoke up. "Sold to Mr. Dawson for $100. The gavel came down with a crack. Emmeline stared at him, confusion and fear mingling in her expression as the sheriff pushed her toward him. Kade stepped up onto the platform and paid the required amount, his jaw tight with controlled anger at the spectacle. "She's yours now, Dawson," the sheriff said, handing him a crudely written bill of sale. "For 3 years, unless you decide to sell the contract to someone else." Kade took Emmeline's arm gently but firmly, guiding her away from the platform and the prying eyes of the crowd. When they were a safe distance away, near the hitching post where his horse waited, he stopped. "Miss Clarke," he said quietly, his voice rough from trail dust but his tone gentle. "I'm Kade Dawson, foreman at the Rockingham Ranch." Her chin lifted defiantly despite the fear in her eyes. "What do you intend to do with me, Mr. Dawson?" "First, I'm going to cut these ropes," he said, drawing a knife from his belt. He saw her flinch and added, "I'm not going to hurt you." With careful movements, he sliced through her bindings. As the ropes fell away, he noticed the raw, red marks they'd left on her wrists. A surge of anger rose in his chest. "Thank you," she said softly, rubbing her wrists. "But you didn't answer my question." Kade replaced his knife and met her gaze directly. "I have no intention of doing anything with you, Miss Clarke. That auction was wrong. No person should be sold like cattle." "Then why did you buy me?" Suspicion laced her voice. "Because Simmons would have." He stopped, not wanting to speak the ugly truth they both knew. "I couldn't let that happen." For the first time, her expression softened slightly. "So what now? Do you expect me to work at your ranch?" Kade shook his head. "No, please," she interrupted suddenly, her voice cracking. "My brother Timothy is sick. He's only 16. I was trying to get medicine and food for him when I was caught. He's alone in our room above Decker's livery. I need to help him." Understanding dawned on Kade. This wasn't some habitual thief. She was a desperate sister trying to save her brother. "Then that's where we'll go first," he said firmly. Relief washed over her face, quickly followed by suspicion. "Just like that. You'll help me." "Why?" Kade adjusted his hat, uncomfortable with her scrutiny. "Let's just say I've seen enough injustice to last a lifetime. I fought a war that was supposed to end slavery, yet here we are." His voice was low, meant only for her ears. "Where I come from, we help folks in need." Emmeline searched his face as if looking for deceit, but found only sincerity in his weathered features. "Thank you," she whispered. Together they walked to the livery stable, an awkward silence between them. Kade led his horse, giving Emmeline space while keeping close enough to deter any comments from townsfolk they passed. The livery owner, A balding man with suspicious eyes blocked their way at the stairs leading to the rooms above. "She ain't welcome here no more," he growled. "Sheriff told me she's a thief." "She's with me now," Kade said evenly, his hand resting casually near his holstered revolver. "And we're going to see her brother." The man hesitated, then stepped aside grudgingly. Emmeline rushed up the narrow stairs with Kade following. The small room at the end of the hallway was stifling hot, the single window doing little to relieve the summer heat. On a thin mattress lay a boy who looked younger than his 16 years, his face flushed with fever. "Timothy," Emmeline cried, kneeling beside the bed, "I'm here now." The boy stirred weakly, his eyes glazed. "Emmy," they said, "they took you away." "I'm back now," she soothed, brushing damp hair from his forehead. She looked up at Kade, fear and pleading in her eyes. "He's burning up. I need to get medicine." Kade nodded, making a quick decision. "Pack your things. Both of you are coming with me." "But he can't travel. We're not leaving town yet," Kade explained. "I've got a room at the hotel. It's clean and cooler than this place. We'll get the doctor to see him there." Emmeline stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you do this?" Kade shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't a man used to explaining himself, especially not the instincts that had guided him through survival for so long. "Let's just get your brother help," he said instead of answering. It took less than 10 minutes for Emmeline to gather their meager belongings into a worn carpet bag. Kade carried Timothy, alarmed at how light the boy was in his arms. They drew stairs as they made their way to the hotel, but Kade's reputation and the hard look in his eyes kept anyone from commenting. The hotel owner raised his eyebrows at the unusual group, but provided clean water and extra blankets when Kade requested them. Once Timothy was settled in the bed, Kade went to fetch the town doctor while Emmeline bathed her brother's face with cool water. Dr. Miller was an elderly man with kind eyes and steady hands. After examining Timothy, he looked up at the anxious faces watching him. "Lung fever," he diagnosed. "He's young and has fight in him, but he needs proper care. Medicine, good food, and rest." "Will he recover?" Emmeline asked, her voice barely audible. The doctor's expression was grave but not hopeless. "With proper treatment, yes, but it will take time." Kade stepped forward. "Whatever he needs, doctor, I'll cover the costs." Dr. Miller nodded, writing out instructions and a list of medicines. "I'll send these over with my assistant. Keep him cool, get broth into him if you can, and follow these directions exactly." After the doctor left, Emmeline turned to Kade, tears in her eyes. "I can't repay you for this." "I'm not asking you to," Kade said simply. He moved toward the door. "I'll get some food sent up. You both need to eat." "Wait," Emmeline called after him. "You still haven't told me why you're helping us." Kade paused, one hand on the doorknob. The question had been nagging at him too. Why had he stepped into this situation? He turned to look at her, standing protectively beside her brother's bed, courage and determination evident despite her exhaustion. "Where I come from," he said slowly, "we don't punish people for trying to survive, and we don't separate families." He gestured to the legal document in his pocket. "They sold you as punishment. Well, then let my arms be your pardon." The words surprised him as much as her. He hadn't intended to say anything so poetic. But seeing the gratitude and something else, hope, perhaps dawn in her eyes, made him glad he had. "Get some rest," he added gruffly. "I'll be back shortly." As the door closed behind him, Emmeline sank into the chair beside Timothy's bed, her mind whirling. In the span of a day, she had gone from condemned prisoner to the charge of a stranger who seemed determined to help them for no reason she could understand. Was he truly as honorable as he appeared, or did he have ulterior motives that would reveal themselves later? Looking at her sleeping brother, she decided it didn't matter for now. Timothy needed help, and Kade Dawson was offering it. Whatever came after, she would face when it arrived. For 3 days, Timothy hovered between improvement and setbacks. Kade postponed his return to the ranch, sending a message to the owner explaining the delay. He spent most of his time securing supplies, giving Emmeline privacy with her brother, but always returned to check on them and ensure they had everything they needed. On the 4th morning, Emmeline woke to find Timothy's fever had broken. His eyes were clear for the first time in days as he sat up, weak but alert. "Emmy," he croaked. "Where are we?" Tears of relief sprang to her eyes as she hugged him carefully. "We're safe," she assured him. "Mr. Dawson has been helping us." "Mr. Dawson?" Timothy's brow furrowed in confusion. Before she could explain, the door opened and Kade entered, carrying a tray with breakfast. He stopped when he saw Timothy awake, a smile breaking across his usually serious face. "Well now, look who's decided to rejoin us," he said, setting the tray down. "How are you feeling, son?" "Weak as a newborn calf," Timothy admitted. "But hungry," Kade chuckled. "That's a good sign." He turned to Emmeline, his expression softening at the sight of her tear-streaked face. "He's on the mend." "Yes," she whispered, unable to express the depth of her gratitude. "Thank you." As Timothy ate his first proper meal in days, Emmeline explained to him everything that had happened. The boy's expression darkened at learning of his sister's sentence, but he listened without interruption. "So you own my sister now?" He finally asked Kade directly, a protective edge to his voice despite his weakness. "No," Kade said firmly. "That paper means nothing to me. No person can own another." "But legally, I bought 3 years of her labor," Kade acknowledged. "But I have no intention of enforcing that contract." Timothy studied him suspiciously. "Then, what do you want?" It was the question Emmeline had been afraid to ask again after their first conversation. What did Kade Dawson want in return for his help? Kade ran a hand through his dark hair, looking uncomfortable. "I want to offer you both a fresh start," he said finally. "The ranch where I work needs help. Timothy, once you're recovered, you could learn ranching good, honest work with fair pay. And Miss Clarke, we've been looking for someone to teach the children on nearby homesteads." Emmeline's heart leapt. "Teaching? But my reputation here, the Rocking M, is 2 days' ride from here," Kade explained. "No one there knows about what happened in Greeley. You'd be judged on your own merits, nothing else. And we'd be free to leave if we wanted," Timothy pressed. Kade nodded solemnly. "Absolutely. I'm offering an opportunity, not another cage." Brother and sister exchanged a look, years of shared struggles and trust passing between them in silent communication. "We accept," Emmeline said, extending her hand formally. "And we'll work hard to repay your kindness." Kade's calloused hand enveloped hers briefly. "It's settled then. As soon as the doctor says Timothy can travel, we'll head to the Rocking M." 3 more days passed before Dr. Miller declared Timothy strong enough for the journey. During that time, Emmeline observed Kade quietly, trying to understand this man who had stepped into their lives so unexpectedly. He was a man of few words but constant action. He treated her with a respectful distance that gradually allowed her to relax in his presence. On the morning of their departure, Emmeline stood in the hotel room, gazing out the window at the town that had nearly destroyed her. She wore a new dress, simple but sturdy, that Kade had purchased for the journey, along with other necessities for her and Timothy. "Ready to leave this place behind?" Kade asked from the doorway. She turned to find him watching her, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. "More than ready," she replied, "though I admit I'm nervous about what lies ahead." "The ranch is good land with good people," he assured her. "You'll see." Downstairs, Timothy waited with their packed belongings and Kade's horse. Kade had purchased a sturdy wagon and team for the journey. reasoning that Timothy wasn't yet strong enough to ride horseback for 2 days. As they prepared to leave, Sheriff Benson approached, eyeing them suspiciously. "Heard you're taking the thieves out of town, Dawson," he said, gesturing toward Emmeline and Timothy. Kade's expression hardened. "I'm taking Miss Clarke and her brother to the Rockingham, where they'll be respected and given honest work." The sheriff snorted. "Just remember, she's legally bound to you for 3 years. If she runs off, you can bring her back to face justice." "There won't be any need for that," Kade replied coldly. "And I'd advise you to mind your own business from now on, Sheriff." The warning in his tone was clear. The sheriff glared but stepped back as Kade helped Emmeline onto the wagon seat and ensured Timothy was comfortable in the back. With a flick of the reins, they left Greeley behind, dust rising in their wake. The journey to the Rockingham ranch took them through rolling grasslands and alongside small streams. Despite his still recovering strength, Timothy's spirits lifted with each mile they put between themselves and Greeley. He peppered Kade with questions about ranch life, absorbing every detail with enthusiasm. Emmeline mostly listened, watching the changing landscape and occasionally catching Kade's eye when he glanced her way. Something was growing between them, a tentative trust built on small kindnesses and shared meals around the evening campfire. On their first night on the trail, after Timothy had fallen asleep, Emmeline finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "Why did you really help us, Mr. Dawson?" She sat across the fire from him, the flames illuminating her face in golden light. "And please, no more vague answers about where you come from." Kade was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and thoughtful. "During the war, I saw men treated as property," he said, staring into the fire. "I saw families torn apart. After, during Reconstruction, I rode with federal marshals for a time, trying to uphold the law that was supposed to have ended such things." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "When I saw you on that auction block, it was like the war had never happened, like nothing had changed." "So it was principle," Emmeline said softly. "At first," he admitted. "But then I learned about your brother, saw how you fought for him even when it cost you everything. That kind of loyalty. It's rare. He's all I have left," she whispered. "Our parents died of fever 3 years ago. We've been on our own since then." "Not anymore," Kade said, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "You're not alone now." The simple declaration hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning neither was ready to examine too closely. But as Emmeline wrapped herself in her blanket that night, she felt safer than she had in years. The Rockingham Ranch came into view late on the second day of travel. Nestled in a valley with mountains rising in the distance, it was larger and more prosperous looking than Emmeline had imagined. A large main house stood surrounded by barns, corrals, bunkhouses, and other outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, and smoke rose from several chimneys. "It's beautiful," Emmeline breathed as they approached. Kade nodded, a hint of pride in his expression. "Built it up from nearly nothing after the war. Mr. Morgan, he owns the place, gave me a chance when not many would. He's a good man." As they drove into the ranch yard, a tall man with silver-streaked hair emerged from the main house. His weathered face broke into a smile when he spotted Kade. "About time you showed up, Dawson," he called. "Was beginning to think you'd run off with my money." "Never, Mr. Morgan," Kade replied with a grin. "Just got delayed by some unexpected business." Morgan's curious gaze shifted to Emmeline and Timothy. Kade made the introductions, explaining their situation in simple terms that they needed a fresh start and had skills the ranch could use. If Morgan was surprised by the new additions, he didn't show it. "Any friend of Kade's is welcome here," he said, extending his hand first to Emmeline, then to Timothy. We can certainly use a teacher for the youngsters. Got 5 families with children within riding distance who have been making do with whatever schooling their parents can provide. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Morgan, Emmeline said sincerely. I won't let you down. And the boy? Morgan asked, eyeing Timothy's still thin frame. I can work, sir, Timothy said quickly. I'm stronger than I look, Morgan chuckled. No doubt, but you'll start light. Kade will find suitable duties for you while you build your strength. That evening, after being shown to a small but comfortable cabin that would be theirs, Emmeline sat on the porch steps watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Timothy was inside, already asleep after the excitement of arrival and a hearty meal. The sound of boots on the packed earth made her look up. Kade approached, carrying a small bundle. Thought you might want these, he said, handing it to her. Inside were books, primers, a reader, arithmetic texts, and several novels. For your teaching, he explained. Found them in the attic of the main house. Mrs. Morgan was a teacher before she passed. Emmeline ran her fingers reverently over the books. These are perfect. Thank you. Kade settled beside her on the steps, keeping a respectful distance. The children will start coming day after tomorrow. Gives you time to settle in and prepare. I can hardly believe this, she admitted. A week ago I thought my life was over. Now I have a home, a purpose. You deserve it, Kade said simply. Both of you do. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, the first stars appearing overhead. Finally, Kade stood to leave. Thank you, Emmeline said again, the words inadequate for all she felt. For everything. Kade tipped his hat. Get some rest, Miss Clarke. Tomorrow's a new beginning. As she watched him walk away toward the bunkhouse, Emmeline felt something stir in her heart. It was too soon, too fragile to name, but it warmed her from within like the first hint of sunrise after a long, dark night. The following weeks brought a rhythm to life at the Rockingham that Emmeline hadn't experienced since before her parents' deaths. Each morning, she prepared the small schoolhouse, a converted storage building that Mr. Morgan had outfitted with desks and a blackboard. Children from 5 to 14 years old arrived on horseback or in wagons, eager for knowledge despite their initial shyness around their new teacher. Timothy, true to his word, worked hard at whatever tasks he was assigned. He started with caring for the chickens and garden, gradually taking on more responsibilities as his strength returned. Kade took him under his wing, teaching him to ride properly, to care for horses, and the basics of cattle ranching. Emmeline saw Kade daily, though their interactions were often brief, a nod as they passed in the yard. A few words exchanged over meals in the main house where they both took dinner with Mr. Morgan and the ranch hands. Yet each encounter left her increasingly aware of him, of the quiet strength in his movements and the rare smile that transformed his serious face. One evening in late September, as autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, Emmeline remained at the schoolhouse after the children had gone, preparing lessons for the following day. A knock at the door interrupted her concentration. "Come in," she called, expecting one of her students who might have forgotten a book. Instead, Kade entered, removing his hat as he stepped inside. Dust covered his clothes and he looked tired from a long day's work. "Mr. Dawson," she greeted him with surprise. "Is everything all right?" "Is Timothy? He's fine," Kade assured her quickly. "Last I saw, he was helping cook with dinner preparations. The boy has a natural way with people." Emmeline smiled proudly. "He always has. Even as a child, he could charm anyone." "Must run in the family," Kade said, then looked as if he wished he could take the words back. He cleared his throat. "I came to ask if you'd like to ride out to Crescent Lake tomorrow. It's Saturday, so no school, and I thought you might enjoy seeing more of the ranch." The invitation surprised her. "I'd like that very much," she replied, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest, "but I'm not much of a rider." "I've got a gentle mare that would suit you," he said, "and it's not far, maybe an hour's ride." "Then yes, thank you," Kade nodded, seeming pleased. "I'll come by your cabin after breakfast." After he left, Emmeline found it difficult to concentrate on her lesson plans. The prospect of spending time alone with Kade both excited and unsettled her. She had grown to respect him deeply over the weeks at the ranch, watching how he treated everyone from Mr. Morgan to the youngest ranch hand with fairness and quiet dignity. And she couldn't deny the way her pulse quickened whenever he was near. But she reminded herself sternly that he had purchased her contract out of principle, not personal interest. His kindness extended to Timothy equally. There was no reason to believe he saw her as anything more than someone he had helped. The next morning dawned clear and cool, perfect for riding. Emmeline wore her sturdiest skirt and boots with a shawl against the autumn chill. Timothy teased her as she fretted over her appearance. "You look fine, Emmy," he said, a knowing gleam in his eye. "For someone who's just going riding with the ranch foreman." She felt her cheeks heat. "Mr. Dawson is simply being neighborly," she insisted. "He probably feels responsible for us." "If you say so," Timothy replied, unconvinced. "But I've seen how he watches you when you're not looking." Before she could respond to that unsettling revelation, a knock announced Kade's arrival. He stood on their porch in clean clothes, his dark hair still damp from washing, hat in hand. "Ready?" he asked, and she nodded, suddenly shy. The mare he had chosen for her was indeed gentle, responding easily to Emmeline's inexperienced commands. As they rode across the vast grasslands of the Rockingham, Kade pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the ranch's history. Emmeline gradually relaxed, enjoying the beauty around them and Kade's company. Crescent Lake was smaller than she had expected, more of a large pond, really, but its setting was stunning. Surrounded by cottonwood trees with leaves turned golden, its surface reflected the blue autumn sky perfectly. "It's lovely," Emmeline breathed as they dismounted. Kade spread a blanket near the shore and produced a small picnic from his saddlebags: bread, cheese, apples, and a canteen of cool water. As they ate, the conversation flowed more easily than it ever had before. Kade spoke of growing up on a small farm in Missouri before the war, of losing his parents while he was fighting, and of his aimless years afterward until finding purpose at the Rockingham. "And you?" he asked. "What was your life like before Greeley?" Emmeline told him about her childhood in Ohio, her father's decision to move west for a fresh start after the war, and the cruel twist of fate that had left her and Timothy orphaned. She spoke of her love for teaching and her dreams of someday having her own school. "You're a natural with those children," Kade observed. "They adore you." "Teaching gives me purpose," she admitted. "When I lost my position in Greeley after the previous teacher's husband returned from back east, it felt like losing part of myself." "Why did they let you go?" "The school board claimed they couldn't afford 2 teachers, but really, they preferred a married woman. Said it set a better example." She plucked a blade of grass, twisting it between her fingers. "They suggested I find a husband if I wanted to continue teaching." Kade's expression darkened. "So their solution was for you to marry for employment rather than love. It's not uncommon," she said with a shrug that didn't quite hide her bitterness. "Women have few options in this world." "It's not right," he said firmly. "No," she agreed. "It's not." Their eyes met and held for a long moment. Something shifted in the air between them, an acknowledgement of shared values and mutual understanding that went beyond their previous interactions. Kade looked away first, clearing his throat. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out the bill of sale from the auction in Greeley. "I had Mr. Morgan's lawyer draw this up." He handed her a second document. It was a formal release from her contract, stating that Emmeline Clarke had fulfilled all obligations and was free from any claim of indentured servitude. Her hands trembled as she read it. "You're freeing me," she whispered. "But you already said, saying it isn't enough," Kade explained. "This makes it legal. No one can ever use that contract against you again." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me for doing what's right," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I just wanted you to know that you're here by choice now, not obligation. You and Timothy can stay as long as you wish, or leave whenever you decide. Your future is entirely your own." Emmeline stared at the document, overwhelmed by the gift of freedom it represented. When she looked up, Kade was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I don't want to leave," she said softly. "I'm glad," he replied, equally soft, "because I've grown accustomed to seeing you every day." The admission hung between them, simple yet profound. Neither moved to close the distance that separated them on the blanket. But something had changed irrevocably in their relationship. On the ride back to the ranch, they spoke of lighter things: the upcoming harvest festival, Timothy's progress with horse training, the winter supplies that would soon be needed. But beneath the ordinary conversation ran a current of awareness that hadn't been there before. As autumn deepened into winter, life at the Rocking M settled into a pattern. Emmeline's school thrived, with 2 more children joining from a newly arrived family. Timothy, now fully recovered from his illness, had proven himself so capable that Kade had promoted him to working directly with the horses, discovering the boy had a natural gift for training them. Emmeline and Kade found themselves spending more time together, often with Timothy or others present, but sometimes alone. They rode together on Saturdays when weather permitted. He attended the weekly reading circle she had organized for the ranch families. She brought lunch to him in the fields when his duties kept him working through midday. Their growing closeness didn't go unnoticed. Timothy teased his sister gently about her admirer, while the ranch hands exchanged knowing glances when Kade's gaze followed Emmeline across a room. Mr. Morgan, watching it all with the wisdom of his years, said nothing but smiled to himself. The first heavy snow of December transformed the ranch into a wonderland of white. School was canceled for the day as families stayed close to home. Emmeline stood at her cabin window, watching the thick flakes swirl in the wind when a knock came at her door. Kade stood on her porch, snow dusting his shoulders and hat. "Thought you might like to go for a sleigh ride," he said, gesturing to a small cutter sleigh hitched to a sturdy bay horse. "The snow's perfect for it." Bundled in her warmest clothes, Emmeline joined him in the sleigh. He tucked a heavy buffalo robe around them both before flicking the reins. The runners cut smoothly through the fresh snow as they glided away from the main ranch buildings and into the open fields. "It's magical," Emmeline breathed, watching her words form clouds in the cold air. The landscape stretched pristine and white in all directions, the only sounds the jingle of the harness bells and the soft shush of the runners. "Sometimes I forget to appreciate the beauty of this place," Kade admitted. "Been so focused on the work that I miss what's right in front of me." There was something in his tone that made her turn to look at him. He was watching her, not the scenery, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. "Emmeline," he said, her name soft on his lips. It was the first time he had used it rather than Miss Clarke. "These past months, having you and Timothy here, it's changed things." "Changed me," her heart quickened. "How so? Before you came, I was just existing, doing my job day after day with no real purpose beyond the next season, the next cattle drive." He paused, searching for words. Now I find myself looking forward to each day, wondering what you'll teach me, what you'll make me see differently. Kade, she began, but he shook his head. Please, let me finish before my courage fails me. He took a deep breath. I know it hasn't been that long and you might still see me as the man who bought your contract. If that's all I am to you, I understand, but I want you to know that I care for you, Emmeline, more than I thought possible. The sleigh had stopped in a small clearing surrounded by pine trees, their branches heavy with snow. In the stillness, Emmeline could hear her own heartbeat. You're not the man who bought my contract, she said finally. You're the man who set me free, who gave Timothy and me a second chance, who showed me that there are still good men in this world. She reached for his gloved hand. And I care for you too. The joy that bloomed on his face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned closer. His lips, warm despite the cold air, met hers in a gentle kiss that promised more. When they drew apart, snowflakes clung to her eyelashes and his hat brim. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, marveling at the unexpected gift they had found. I should get you back before you freeze, Kade said reluctantly, though neither made a move to break the moment. I've never felt warmer, Emmeline replied with a smile that made his heart skip. The days leading up to Christmas were filled with preparations. The ranch families planned a communal celebration in the main house, with everyone contributing food, decorations, and gifts. Emmeline's students performed a pageant she had organized, while Timothy and the other young men cut fresh pine boughs to festoon the walls and banisters. On Christmas Eve, after the festivities were winding down, Kade asked Emmeline to walk with him despite the cold. They strolled toward her cabin, the path lit by moonlight reflecting off the snow. I have something for you, he said, producing a small package wrapped in brown paper and string. I wanted to give it to you privately. Curious, Emmeline unwrapped it to reveal a small leather-bound book of poetry by Emily Dickinson. Oh, Kade, she breathed, running her fingers over the gold-embossed title. It's beautiful. Open it, he urged gently. Inside the front cover he had written, To Emmeline, who teaches me daily that hope is the thing with feathers, with all my heart, Kade. Tears pricked her eyes as she looked up at him. This is the most thoughtful gift I've ever received. There's something else, he said, suddenly looking nervous. From his pocket he withdrew a small wooden box. Emmeline's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a ring, a simple gold band set with a small pearl. I know it's not grand, he began, but she shook her head, silencing him. It's perfect, she whispered. Kade took her hand in his. Emmeline Clarke, these past months have shown me what I was missing in my life. You've brought light and purpose and joy. I love you, and if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my days trying to make you as happy as you've made me. Are you asking me to marry you? She asked, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. I am, he confirmed, though I'm making a mess of it. No, she laughed through her tears. You're doing it perfectly. Is that a yes? Hope filled his voice. Yes, she said firmly. Yes, I will marry you, Kade Dawson. He slipped the ring onto her finger before pulling her into his arms. Their kiss sealed the promise between them, sweet and certain in the winter night. When they told Timothy the next morning, he feigned surprise that fooled neither of them. About time, he said, hugging his sister and shaking Kade's hand firmly. I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in the barn until you figured it out. Mr. Morgan was equally pleased when they shared their news, offering them the use of the ranch's small chapel for the wedding and suggesting they might want to move into the vacant foreman's house, which was larger and more suitable for a family than Kade's quarters in the bunkhouse or Emmeline's small cabin. They were married on New Year's Day, 1877, with Timothy standing proud beside his sister and Mr. Morgan giving the bride away. The ranch hands and neighboring families filled the chapel to witness the union of two people who had found each other against all odds. As Emmeline and Kade exchanged their vows, she thought back to that terrible day in Greeley when her world had seemed to end. How could she have known then that what appeared to be her greatest disgrace would lead her to her greatest joy? Later, as they danced at their wedding celebration, Kade held her close and whispered, "Happy, more than I ever dreamed possible," she replied honestly. "And you?" "I never knew what happiness truly was until you," he said, his eyes reflecting the love that had grown between them. "Now I do." Spring came early that year, bringing new growth to the ranch and new changes to the newlyweds' lives. Emmeline continued teaching, though now from the schoolhouse Mr. Morgan had built properly on the ranch rather than the converted storage building. She and Kade settled into the foreman's house, which they had made their own with simple furnishings and books lining the shelves. Timothy, now 17 and thriving, had become the ranch's unofficial horse trainer, with a gift for gentling even the most spirited animals. He had his own quarters in the bunkhouse and was saving his wages carefully, with dreams of someday having his own small horse breeding operation. One warm evening in May, as Emmeline and Kade sat on their porch watching the sunset, she took his hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. "I have news," she said softly, watching his expression. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by wonder and joy so pure it took her breath away. "A baby," he whispered. She nodded, smiling through happy tears. "Due in November, according to Dr. Wilson." Kade gathered her in his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious material on earth. "Thank you," he murmured against her hair, "for this gift, for everything." That night, as they lay together in their bed, Kade's hand protectively covering where their child grew, Emmeline thought about the journey that had brought them here. From the auction block to his arms, from punishment to pardon, from desperation to love. "What are you thinking about?" Kade asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "About what you said that day in Greeley," she replied. "Let my arms be your pardon, you remember." "I remember," he said, tightening his embrace. "I meant it. I know you did." She turned to face him, tracing his features in the dim moonlight filtering through their window. "But it works both ways, you know. Your arms pardoned me, but loving you has pardoned something in me too. The fear, the distrust, the belief that nothing good could happen again." Kade kissed her gently. "That's what love does, I think. Heals us both." As their life together unfolded, that healing continued. Their son, James Morgan Dawson, was born in late November, bringing new joy to the ranch. Mr. Morgan, honored by his namesake, doted on the baby as if he were his own grandson. 2 years later, a daughter joined their family, Catherine Grace, with her mother's gentle spirit and her father's determined nature. The children grew strong and happy, surrounded by love and the freedom of ranch life. Timothy realized his dream at 21, when Mr. Morgan helped him purchase land adjoining the Rockingham for his horse breeding operation. His skill with horses had become renowned in the region, bringing buyers from as far away as Denver. When Mr. Morgan passed peacefully in his sleep, 5 years after Emmeline and Kade's wedding, he left the ranch to them jointly, having no family of his own. The responsibility weighed heavily on them at first, but together they managed the transition, honoring his legacy while making the ranch their own. 10 years after that fateful day in Greeley, Emmeline stood on the porch of their home, watching Kade teach 8-year-old James to rope while 6-year-old Katie sat nearby, absorbed in one of her mother's books. Timothy, now a successful horse breeder, rode up the lane with his wife, Maria, and their toddler son. Life wasn't perfect, there were still hardships, disagreements, and challenges, but it was rich and full in ways Emmeline could never have imagined during those dark days when she had been sold as punishment. That evening, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Emmeline found Cade in his study, going over the ranch accounts. "You ever think about how different our lives might have been?" she asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. He looked up, the lines around his eyes crinkling as he smiled. "If I hadn't been in Greeley that day, if I hadn't seen you on that platform," she nodded. Cade set down his pencil and reached for her hand. "I try not to dwell on might-have-beens," he said. "But I do thank God every day that I was there, that something made me step forward when I did." "What do you think it was that made you do it, I mean?" He considered the question seriously. "At first, I thought it was just outrage at the injustice. Then I believed it might have been compassion for your situation." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But looking back, I think some part of me recognized you, Emmeline, not your face but your soul, like it was calling to mine." "That sounds very poetic for a practical rancher," she teased gently. "You've rubbed off on me," he replied with a grin. "All those books you make me read." She laughed, the sound as dear to him now as it had been the first time he'd heard it. "I love you, Kade Dawson." "And I love you, Emmeline Dawson. Yesterday, today, and all the tomorrows we have left." As he pulled her onto his lap for a kiss that still held all the passion of their early days, Emmeline reflected that what had begun as the worst day of her life had set her on the path to the best life she could imagine. From shame to honor, from despair to hope, from being sold as punishment to finding arms that would forever be her pardon. Sometimes, she thought as she melted into her husband's embrace, the darkest moments led to the brightest futures. And sometimes, a single act of kindness could change not just a life, but generations to come. On the wall behind Cade's desk hung a framed document, the release from her contract that he had given her that day by Crescent Lake. Next to it was a simple pen sketch Timothy had done of the three of them in their early days at the ranch. Together, they told the story of a journey from bondage to freedom, from strangers to family, from punishment to pardon. It was a story Emmeline would someday tell their children and grandchildren. A story of courage and redemption. A story of how love, when given freely, could transform even the most hopeless circumstances into something beautiful. And it had all begun with those words spoken by a dusty cowboy with integrity in his heart and compassion in his eyes. "Then let my arms be your pardon."